Hi, everyone, and welcome back for another album review. Today, I'm talking about the Gothenburg godfathers of melodic death metal, the one and the only At the Gates. They have a brand new album out tomorrow. It's called The Nightmare of Being. I just got my copy this morning. I'm super excited to tell you what's in this album. Before I start digging into the nuts and bolts of it, let's just talk really quick production-wise. So the album was recorded over different studios. You know, the drums were done at Studio Gröndal with Jens Bogren, the guitars and bass with Andy LaRocque at Sonic Train Studios, and the vocals were done at Welfare Sounds with Per Stalberg. So, you know, there's a lot of hands involved with what's going on this, but the album was mixed and mastered at Fascination Street Studios. And for those of you who may not be familiar with that, you know the names of bands that are synonymous with this one. You're talking Amon Amarth, Opeth, Creator, those kinds of heavies. Yeah. So, you know, this has got to be some really good hands involved with it. So the mixing of that was done by Jens Bogren. So, you know, he's been involved with them on other stuff. 2014, he helped with At War with Reality. So, you know, there's some mixed in there that's got some history that's going to bring in the feels of this album to make it feel still like At the Gates, but then there's something else additional on top of it. And when I say that, I'm talking, you know, it's just so many different things going on. And I'm going to go a little bit more track by track with this one because there were really different things going on throughout. And, you know, if you start with the first track, Spectra of Extinction, you know, it's got this weird, slow, atmospheric intro that kind of gave away to like really cool chugging guitars. There's like super fast drumming tempos. You know, there's waning solos, but of course with the waning, you got these really screaming bends that are going on. I mean, there's a lot of angry energy, and man, the vocals are just crazy intense. I mean, that's a great way to start off a new album, especially with these guys. You know, when you've had other albums, and I believe this is their 7th studio album. So when you've had these other ones behind that, you've got people expecting things of you. And I try to go into something without any expectation because you never know what an artist is going to decide to put out the next time. So it was really cool to feel the normal vibes of what you feel with them, but then something like really out there feeling. And, you know, if you head into the second track's The Paradox, again, it brings that intense energy. There's these really cool hooks going throughout the song. I mean, automatically I was like, there's like this neck nodding tempos. I'm just like, yeah. And, but then they went from these slower to like, hell yeah, you know. And then it's got like these really cool tempo interchanges, and they go from like this rapid fire to the melodic tempo. And then of course it's like this cool clean solo, like the guitars are really clean sounding in it. And it's like this dueling guitar track that comes partway through. And of course, you know, like the vocals, still same crazy vocals as always, but then they've got this weird intense whisper to them. So there's some really cool different elements that are going on throughout the entire track. They're going to keep you kind of going, well, okay, what's coming next? And you know, when you jump into the third track, you've got of course the title track, The Nightmare of Being. And again, you know, there's all this cool stuff going on, but this one is like really dark, and the guitar riffs, they scream that Gothenburg sound. And I mean, I have to say the track felt really angsty, and it's got this undertone of just anger, and it's layered with distorted riff moments that are just super like out there. And of course you got these cool clean bending vibrato solo that comes in, and so it's like, wow, what's going on here? And it's got a slower tempo. I think, you know, you're talking the first 3 tracks, and there's so many different things going on in just the first 3 tracks. It's like, what is coming on the rest of the album? You know, and so you jump into the 4th track, Garden of Cypress. So it's got this really slow tempo to open it. And I'm like, okay, this is kind of different. And it's got like these fills of super heavy cymbals. Like the drums are really there in your face. You cannot miss it at this point. And I feel like almost like this track was taking me on a journey. And there's like lots of reverb. There's a saxophone that comes in. It puts like this almost weird, like jazzy feel to the melodic death metal. I'm like jazzy. So that's why I say that I think this album underlyingly feels more experimental for me. You know, it's got haunting vocals. They've got a whisper to them. And then it's almost more like a speaking tone for the track versus, you know, this normal singing. You know, it's very experimental to the feel of this track. And I almost have to say that it has like this weird, almost reminiscent undertone of something you would expect to find on a Pink Floyd album, but just with a little more grit that only can be done by like At the Gates. You know, then you dive into track 5 with Touched by the White Hands of Death. And it started out with that, again, that slow experimental intro, but then it broke into like full heavy riffs. And I say this track was layered. It's layered with like changing tempos, chugging guitars, pounding drums. So many things were just happening that it just really it brought straight in that something different, but then again, the same progression as the songs are going through in the album. you hit the sixth one, which is the Fall into Time. It's got a nice rhythmic feel to it. It's got a distorted guitar opening. It's mixed with like almost like this. I want to say, like when you hear like monk chanting, it's got like that feel of like a choral monk chanting in going on in this. And then it's got this leading you to this track that it got bigger as it progressed. It's super heavy bass. The drums are just pounding, and you get more of that super angry feel in the lyrics. I mean, if I hadn't had enough and like, I'm going, okay, this is so much is going on, I'm ready for the next one too, still, because it's so good. And what else could they add in this album? So, I have to say, when you get on into the next, it's got the Cult of Salvation. And I'm saying, like, is this when I thought, what was left to be put in this album? Twin guitar opening, anybody? I mean, that just threw me because I was not expecting that. It's got a slow tempo. It's something more typical you would expect out of Out the Gates. But and halfway through, the tempo picks up, and it just does this whole morphosing thing, metamorphosing, changing thing that it does. So a really, really cool track. Number 8, The Abstract Enthroned. I mean, it's another track I would say I totally expect from At the Gates. It's their traditional sound. I just think that there was a really fast tempo to this compared to the previous track, Cult of Salvation. So there's a lot of things going on in this album, but you're going to get these moments of just fast anger and impactful music. And then you're going to get that slower kind of, we got to bring you down a bit, and then, move on into the next. And I would say that's Cosmic Pessimism. And the intro on this one was really interesting. And it's like a very different styling of guitars. It's almost like there's some sort of underlying, like, it feels like and it sounds almost like it's acoustic, but I couldn't really point that out. I mean, acoustic, but it could be electroacoustic, or just the way that they style the guitars. It just has a very different sound to it. And the vocals in this were speaking tone as well. There was a feel of like I want to say like an almost, you're back in the 60s going to a speakeasy. It's kind of like this hippie-ish vibe set to At the Gates melodic death metal, if that makes any sense at all. It's just got something very different in the feel. And they wrap it up with the last track called Eternal Winter of Reason. Dudes, this is dark from the absolute beginning. I mean, this really felt traditional At the Gates. I mean, there was so much push and pull in the tempos, and the feel of rage in this track was so there. And, all in all, it had that weird atmospheric undertone that I kept feeling throughout the album, that I just kept saying it felt experimental, but like it was like this whole album, all the tracks just kind of had this way they kind of melded together in this like weird but yet perfect fit. It's a really cool album, and I say if you're looking for something a little bit different that you're not used to expecting out of At the Gates, this might be it. It's something I'm not necessarily used to hearing from them. When I keep saying that there's that traditional sound you get used to because of that Gothenburg sound that they've cemented, and then they just pull something a little bit more experimental out to throw out there and change things up. And I think it's a really cool, fun album, and I think you guys are really going to want to dig your teeth in this one and see which tracks you love the most. And if you hear some of what I'm hearing throughout this album as well, and if you hear something that I missed or that I that didn't connect with as well, that you maybe connected with more than I did, for the Godfathers making another album, I'm so happy, because At the Gates have always been a great band. They've opened the doors for so many artists that I've loved throughout the years. They have come from that Swedish sound, and other bands in other regions that want to sound like that sound, they've broken it wide open. So this is an album you cannot go wrong with. It's out through Century Media Records tomorrow. You guys can get this on, I think they've got a limited deluxe transparent blood red 2 LP release. They've got a 2 LD CD release that's got a media book involved, standard CD. You guys can buy it digitally, standard LPs. You can't go wrong with any of these. You might want to get your hands on one of these quicker than the others if you like those collection editions that you can't necessarily find. I think this was an absolute great release from At the Gates, and I think you guys really need to check this one out. It's out tomorrow, so go stream it, buy it, support the guys, and I will talk to you guys later.